of you here in the room and those of you watching from wherever you happen to be. I'm Michael Levine-Clark. I'm the Dean of Libraries at the University of Denver, and I'm presenting today, or really chatting today, with Liz Lorbeer from Stryker School of Medicine and Judith Russell from the University of Florida. And we're here to talk about the challenge of managing open research in all its complexities at our different institutions. And this is a pretty broadly encompassing topic, deliberately so. And we're here from three very different institutions, different scale, different research scope, different focus. And we'll talk a little bit about those differences. And that's deliberate, right? We want to talk about how a very, very large research institution down to a very small institution manage this challenging topic. I know you can't read this, and so I'll try to talk through it. But this is a slide originally used at an American Association of American Universities, and an Association of Public and Land Grant Universities guide to research data. It applies, I think, equally well to the broader topic of open research, right? Not just data. And it's trying to represent the ecosystem that impacts how a researcher navigates through the research process and all of the things that they have to think about. So at the center is the researcher, and really, I think at the center of much of what we do as libraries and as publishers is also the researcher. The next circle out is the college or the department. In the college and the department is where the recognition and the rewards come into play, right? So this is where really the base level where tenure and promotion happens. It's also where disciplinary culture comes into play, right? This is where the sort of the norms of that subject, of that discipline, influence the researcher in how they think about their research and how they make decisions about open access or not. The next layer out is the institution, and I'm going to skip that for a minute. And then outside of the institution are all sorts of external factors that influence the researcher. There are agencies and sponsors, the funding sources that often have mandates, increasingly have mandates. There are and requirements around what you do with your research in terms of open access. There are the disciplines and the societies that, just like the college and the department, are also influencing cultural norms. There are a range of different services and tools that the researcher can use, or the institution or the department can use to track the data or the research or to discover that information. And then there are publishers and associations and societies that are either publishing that information or are driving decisions about how and where to find that information. And then at the institutional level, there are a number of things that come into play, and I've outlined some of them at the broad level, right? So the institution cares about the compliance with funder mandates. How do you make sure, as an institution, that your authors are following through with deposit of the article, deposit of open data, making sure that something as basic as that the funder is acknowledged. How do all of those things happen? And somebody at the institution needs to make sure that those things are happening. And it might be the library, it might be the Office of Research, it might be a combination of both. But it needs to be happening. And it also could be happening in the college or in the department at really large institutions. But it matters, obviously, for that researcher's ability to get continued funding, but it also matters for the institution to be able to continue to get funding. Data management is a tremendously important piece of this, right? There's the requirement often to write a data management plan into your grant proposal. There are requirements to make sure you're preserving data, make sure that you are making that data accessible. And that may or may not be happening at any level at the institution. Often this is a sort of an overlooked burden on the researcher, but the library can and probably should be playing a role. There are requirements around metadata and linking of information, right? So if somebody deposits an article, it needs to be described and made accessible. There are requirements about reporting back to the funders to make sure that that compliance has been happening. There are requirements both for data and for the research around preservation and access. And then reputation management is not a requirement at all of any funders. It's not about open research, but it's something that is happening simultaneously at institutions that really comes into play. The idea that so we all have offices and spend a lot of time making sure that our faculty publications are accurately represented in Scopus and Web of Science and everywhere else, right? So all of these things are a mix of activities happening at the institutional level, and the library may or may not be playing a role in any of these. So that was a bit of some context setting, and now we want to talk about our own institutions and what we're doing in this arena. You can see here that we are very different institutions. Liz represents the Stryker School of Medicine, which is obviously a medical school. Only 70 doctoral degrees awarded annually, 146 faculty, a $3 million research expenditure, and 117 articles published annually. University of Denver is somewhere in the middle, $40 million in research, 669 articles, and Florida is massive, right? Almost $1 billion in research expenditures annually, 8,400 articles published annually. We have very different scale out of each of our institutions. We also have very different disciplinary strengths. Obviously, Stryker is a medical school. University of Denver has strengths in the social and behavioral sciences, but is a comprehensive institution. University of Florida has strengths in STEM, but is also a comprehensive institution. So I'm gonna now show data about each of our institutions, and we'll talk through that from the podium, I guess, from the table, I mean. So this is University of Florida.
What we did was we thought part of helping you understand the similarities and differences of our quite distinctive institutions was we did an analysis of what were the top 10 publishers in which our authors chose to publish. And so this is reflecting the 10 most frequently selected publishers by our authors. And as you can see, Elsevier is incredibly dominant in that space. Wiley and Springer fall second, but close to one another. And then it drops off with a number of other publisher families. And this is by no means comprehensive in any way of all the places where our authors publish. But we thought it gave you a sense of, you know, when Michael says we're heavily STEM, even though a comprehensive university, how heavily STEM we are when you look at the percentage of our publications that fall in Elsevier, Wiley, and Springer.
Great. And here's University of Denver, and Elsevier is also #1 for us, but #2 is Taylor and Francis, which I think was well down the list for Florida. APA shows up in our top 10 as well, and doesn't in the other two institutions because we have a really strong psychology, behavioral sciences focus. And I think Taylor and Francis does for that psychology focus as well.
So I am at a very small medical school in the Midwest. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary. We like to say that we are small but mighty. We have been publishing pretty much, as you can see, all along. We've had 350 articles. We're very proud of that since our conception. But you can see that, again, we look very much like our R01s as well, with publishing in the STM literature, Elsevier, Wiley, Springer, and LWW. We are primarily just in medicine. And so I'm really very proud of what we've been doing. We are just graduate, undergraduate medical residency programs, and then medical education. And we do have just a few NIH grants that we are very proud of. So I'm just going to continue on and talk about the comparison of the three schools that of Florida, Denver, and Stryker School of Medicine. And you can see that, again, across the board, across the spectrum, we have a tendency to publish in the STM literature. We're publishing in the same publishers. There is some differences, but you can see the urgency with academic research libraries that these publishers and us librarians, we need to work together in order to make sure that our authors, that the research engine, and that our goals as a community, that we're moving the ball forward, and that we both are doing what we need to do to further innovation and research and create, as I like to say, a healthier world for ourselves. So just looking at that, I think it's pretty impressive that there's so much similarity. With that also being said, we also need to take a look at what I think is really important with capturing this information, that the publishers are also capturing when our authors submit their manuscripts, that they're capturing accurate information about our mastheads, that they're asking our authors for those ORCID IDs so that we are getting accurate information. We, the library, and the research centers are getting that accurate information. And that also, we are on a pathway that we can support our early career researchers and our faculty at large with OA, as well as finding ways to make sure that our research is disseminated for full access. I also like to point out that we do have our differences. As you can see that in Florida, they are a land grant institution, and you can see that with the horticultural science as well. Denver has more of a social sciences approach to their institutional mission with APA. And then at my school, we are medicine-based, and we have Curious, which is a different approach to publishing, plus BMJ. Okay, so we're going to go to mentee slides where we're going to ask you some questions. If you can go to hopefully I didn't say too many W's, 3ws.mentee.com. There's a code. The code number is 55658618. I'm sure you can all see that. And if you can put what is your institution name, we'd like to know, or what is your publisher or vendor, please go ahead. Of course, if you're independent, go ahead and put it down if you're independent. So University of South Carolina, woohoo. I wish I was a better sports fan so I could call out your team names, but I'm not. Next slide. Just press it, okay. And I want to thank Laura Spears. Oh, press the space bar. Oh, I'm sorry. Laura Spears at the University of Florida for her helping us with Mentimeter. She is quite, I did press the space bar? Yeah. Nope. Okay. 36, yeah. Maybe the arrow button? Oh, there we go. Arrow button. I want to just thank Laura Spears at the University of Florida for helping us put this together. That was very kind of her as well. So thank you very much. I'm going to go to the next. Whoop. Anybody else? Okay. Oh. Okay. All right. You had your chance. All right. There we go. What is your institution's Carnegie class? All right.
So the reason we were asking these questions is partly we wanted to see, of course, what the mix of institutions was, but partly because we think that these sorts of conversations about how to manage research matter at every institutional level. We represent doctoral institutions. Obviously, doctoral institutions are research defined in a way, right? We define our mission around research. We have strong requirements around research, but it is something I think that every institution type needs to be thinking about. How do you manage the open research that is, especially when you start to think about funder mandates? So while most of the institutions that are represented there or the universities that are represented on this slide are doctoral, I do think that this is something of importance for every level, but it's very interesting that only doctoral institutions, or largely doctoral institutions, are what came to this session.
Whoever that special focus institution is, I'm with you. I'm your other friend. So we're going to go on to our library's roles in managing compliance.
Well, not for the, we were going to talk about it first.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
Sure. What we thought we would do is each of us would talk a little bit about how we're managing the library's participation in compliance and in the research enterprise, to give you a sense of how differently we might be handling it, and then go and ask you for a little bit of feedback about how your roles are. So at the Smathers Libraries at the University of Florida, we became very quickly the official site for guidance on funder requirements, and we maintain and update all that information. We have a very large program of liaison librarians, and all of our liaison librarians are trained to assist authors with deposit and or to refer them to the experts if they need assistance beyond their level of expertise. What we find is that most of our authors, if they're repeatedly getting funding from the same agency, kind of learn that one and know what to do, but then occasionally they're involved in a grant with a different agency and they don't have a clue, or they confuse the requirements for the primary agency. So that's been very helpful. We were the founder, and we are an active participant in a campus-wide research computing advisory committee that has about 30 members, 3 of whom are representatives of the libraries. So our Associate Dean for Research, our Data Management Librarian, and another librarian heavily involved in our technology. Our Data Management Librarian assists with the development of achievable and reasonable data management plans. In the very early days of data management plans, they were often negligible or they were impossible to fulfill. And so he's had a really important role with training, but then also with individual consultations, which has often led to him then being incorporated into the grants themselves. But he also works with them on the implementation of those data management plans, because it doesn't do any good to have a good data management plan and not follow through on it. So he has a really key role for us. He also has a situation where he's training the same liaison librarians. So again, they should be aware of the resources that we already have out there for self-instruction, but then they can guide them a little bit and they can refer them to him when they need more intense assistance. He also leads a UF-wide data management and curation working group. They can't hear? Maybe move it closer. Is that better? So I'm saying he also leads a university-wide data management and curation working group. And then as the libraries, we license the chorus data that Michael and I are going to talk about later in the program, which helps us track whether the deposits have been completed. We do also have an institutional repository, which will accept small and moderate-sized data sets and link them to the deposited articles. And then the larger sets, we facilitate their working to deposit them under what we call the hypergator, our large computer that's managed under the CIO. And part of the IR process is a process to help them provide the appropriate description and metadata so that both the data set and the article itself go in reasonably described and linked. And that's sort of a cross-cutting idea of some of the things that we're doing, but maybe the major things.
Thanks. So University of Denver is much smaller than Florida. We have 20 librarians and don't actually have that many liaison librarians, right? We have a STEM librarian, for instance. All of them have many of the same roles, but it's a challenge at the size and the scale in terms of what we can do in the library. So I would say that we are active in terms of compliance, but there is no formal library role in compliance. We offer workshops and we provide consultations. We have done a series of focused interviews with our faculty around their actions related to compliance, trying to understand their activities and their motivations around depositing of an article, around managing their data. But we don't have a formal role. We manage a repository, and so in the process of managing the repository, we certainly are helping with compliance. One of the things that we've discovered in these focused interviews with our faculty is that they want to be compliant. They don't fully understand what it means to be compliant. And they sometimes are compliant in spirit, if not compliant in terms of how they actually should be compliant, right? So they're depositing the wrong thing in the wrong place, for instance. Most of them want their research to be open, right? They want to make that data available to the world, not just because it's a mandate, but because they believe in that. But they're truly confused by it, right? So they do come to the library, and we try to be helpful in understanding both what is possible and what is required. We tend, as I said earlier, we tend to be strong in the social and behavioral sciences. So there, especially with data, is a big concern about making that open and available, right? There's a concern about protecting subjects, even if there's a requirement that the data sets be deposited in some way. We offer a DMP tool and sort of help with managing of data, but we don't, again, have a formal process for that. And then I would say that in conversations, even with our intellectual property office within the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, they recognize that there's a need to be thinking about compliance at probably a more systematic level, but they also don't seem to be that concerned about it, right? So it's interesting, right? It's clearly a need. It's something that we are seeing in the library some demand for, but at the institutional level, there seems to be less urgency about it than at the library level.
I'm going to use the podium.
Okay.
I'm going to use the podium mic because I'm told that it's a little bit better for our online viewers. So again, at a very small, newer medical school, and as you can imagine, we did not have any of this set up until very recently. So how do you start up a research engine, and how do you play catch up? And there's no such thing as playing catch up because you have to start it up. So we work as a team. So we're very small, we're very agile. And I work very closely with the sponsored research administrator, the SPA coordinator. And we like to tell our researchers that they're going to the SPA, but it's not the SPA that they know. So I worked very closely. His name is Chris Snyder, and he's fantastic. And we have onboarded a lot of researchers that have joined, I shouldn't say a lot to us is like 3 at a newer medical school. So we've onboarded them, and they're bringing their sponsored research or funded research with them. And so where they're coming from, they were not always fully compliant because they didn't know, or as was mentioned prior, they thought they were compliant, but maybe not everything was there. So I've worked closely to make sure that with Chris, our research navigator, with our assistant deans as well for research, and with our research dean as well, to make sure that the people that we're onboarding, they have everything that they need moving forward. Where we are right now, we have new faculty that has joined us 2 years ago. We've just built a data warehouse that we launched 2 months ago, and we're getting ready for our data sets. We haven't published any data sets yet, but we know that's coming with NIH. So we're in a lot of planning phases. We are making sure that the published research is being linked. We are sharing a repository with the academic library. Western Michigan University has been very generous. Western Michigan University actually is our parent, and they've been very, very generous to help us get started. They've allowed us to use the repository at their campus. So we're getting going there, but we have a lot of training to do for our faculty. Our faculty are clinicians. They did not come from a place where there was active research, and so we're moving that ball, and we're becoming active researchers. We're going out to get grants. There's lots and lots of support. There's someone who's a medical editor to help them write grants. There is, again, this research navigator that will help them with the IRB process. There's a data warehouse. There's biostatisticians and epidemiologists. Lots of support with the whole process and keeping with compliance. We're verifying. We do a lot of just-in-time, too, but we can. There isn't very many of us. And in this whole process, we know each other. We're just one building and 7 floors. So it's a very intimate process, and it's something that I'd never experienced coming from an R01, where I didn't know everybody, and I didn't know what other people do. And so I appreciate everybody's role in it, and it has made me understand where the sticky places are. And I also have learned that even though I may have certain expertise, I've also learned where other expertise are, and how to lean on those people and my colleagues to teach me what I need to do my job better. So I really feel that moving forward, it will be a very unique experience. I think it's something to share in the future. But like I said, we only have like 2 or 3 NIH grants, really small. But I'm really excited about the future.
Another mentee me, some of you may have already worked ahead on that. So can you pull that back up? There we go. Oh, yep, people are already, oh, we're getting some answers there. So we were curious to see, from what you've heard, the narratives of what we're doing, how you would compare your institution with ours. Well, it's good to see the University of Florida has some colleagues out there. We're going to, because we're kind of watching the clock, we're going to start accelerating through this a little more quickly, but this was really, I think, a very important part of the discussion. So I think
Go to the next
we
one.
can go ahead and move on.
I
Yeah.
got to meet my one friend here.
Yes, still there, staying with you.
The next one is campus partners and open research.
So we've talked a little bit about some of that in presenting what we're doing on our campuses, but I think if you go ahead and move to the mentee, what we were hoping is you'd put in words or phrases indicating who are the other entities on campus with which you're collaborating. It didn't advance.
Okay.
Yeah, go to the next one. There we, no? She didn't put a mentee in there?
It isn't, oh,
This was a mentee.
Was it?
the next one is.
Okay.
There we go.
It should
There
be-
it is.
should
Oh,
be-
there it is.
Sorry.
The boxes are
Yeah.
popping up now. So if you
So
would,
while this pops up, I think maybe
Yes.
we can talk through, and one of the things that's challenging is figuring out who to actually collaborate with on campus, right? There is the Office of Research. Every university at every doctoral institute, university at least, has an Office of Research of some sort. And I think we all collaborate in some way with that office, but really we're kind of curious about who else might be involved in these decisions. And just for example, at the University of Denver, we do have these informal collaborations with the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, but we also work fairly closely with IT, also in an informal way, on our repository and on data management. But we're trying to think about how to formalize that so that there's a more systematic process across the board.
and at UF, and again, I think it's a question of scale, we have 16 colleges, each of which has an associate dean for research. And we work very closely with them, and a lot of the responsibility is distributed or delegated from the Office of Research to them. And so they become very active partners with us, and that's where our liaison librarians become very important. And clearly, just even from the things I said before, our partnership with research computing under the CIO is a very, very important part of what we do. And I see some of you are also calling out research computing and Office of Medical Education.
Yeah, so one of the things that we were really interested in doing with this mentee polling is having a better understanding ourselves of what's going on across the landscape. So I don't know how we maybe we'll figure out a way to distribute this in some way.
You want to take us to the next one, since we're still watching our time here.
Right. So one of the things that is clear is that there are a range of different research tools that might be, or tools that may be used for managing research data and for managing open publications. Different universities use different things. We're both curious about what others use and certainly want to share what we use. We use Chorus's dashboard for monitoring the whether or not things have been deposited in an open format, what publications. I mentioned that we use DMP tool for helping our researchers with data plans. We also have to navigate and probably every single person at a university has to navigate whatever tool or set of tools the university uses for tracking faculty publications, right? So we have, our university uses digital measures. Our faculty hate it, but it's a tool that has to be used, right? They have to be tracking that. So there's a tracking of publications that's happening, and to the extent that it's possible to overlap that requirement with the requirement of deposit, I think there's some importance there.
And again, part of what's distributed at UF is that it's by and large the responsibility of the Associate Dean for Research in each college to be responsible for the compliance of their individual authors. And that is a difficulty for them because, on an annual activity report, they're going to know what they published, but that may be beyond the time when the deposit was supposed to have happened. So we are also subscribing to Chorus. I think, do you want to go on to that next slide that shows the Chorus slide? One of the things that we find very helpful is that they're cutting across a large number of publishers. As comprehensive as we are, it's not 100% of the places where our authors publish, but it's a huge percentage of what they publish. And they validate whether the deposit has occurred in the correct repository. And that allows us to share that data and then focus on the ones that the time is running out and they're not yet deposited, so we can try to interdict it before we would get to the point of a compliance problem. But again, the scale issue comes in, and we're so large, and I'm sure you have this problem with your authors too, but they don't all use their official university address when they submit an article. And so we're sometimes looking at them and saying, is this person or that person? What college or department should we be referring this to? We have been seeking for a long time to work with Chorus and perfect the information they're providing and develop an automated system, because again, at the scale that we're dealing with, we really need an automated way to do these referrals back to the author themselves and to that Associate Dean for Research for it to be fully functional. So one of the reasons that I've joined the Chorus board is to try to influence how they're developing their tools and to make sure that they work with us, and then we're having our own IT staff look at how they might automate that process for us so we could be more effective.
So we also use Chorus, and because of the difference in scale, we actually were able to go in and sort of do an audit of each and every publication that was listed in this dashboard, and to try to investigate and in fact do a series of interviews with our faculty to understand how they deposited or didn't that particular article, right? So what was their understanding of the funding requirements, and what had they actually done? So just because we're that much smaller in terms of our publishing volume, we were able to do a deep dive in this. Probably not something we could do in an ongoing basis, but it was something that we could do in a one-time basis.
We'll go ahead and let you work on the Mentee Me questions on this while we talk about this a little bit. We've been very active at Florida and have about 16 different transformative agreements, most of them in the form of read and publish agreements with relatively small publishers, society publishers, independent publishers. And we do look at them for a number of factors. We want to be sure that it's something that's transparent to the author. It just sort of happens automatically. They don't have to know about it and ask for it. We want to be sure that there's a very low administrative burden on the library, and preferably a moderate to low cost, so that it's something we can actually afford to do. We see it as a really important way to build a relationship with our authors and to encourage them to do open access publishing, because we do find with the research that we've done with our authors that the APC is the major barrier to choosing open access. Michael, I think, indicated that there's this commitment to openness of research, but the APCs can become a barrier.
Yeah, and so we only have one read and publish deal at this point, and somebody answered shrug emoji, and yes, no idea how to do this, but it's something that we clearly need to be thinking about, and we probably need to be thinking about it across libraries and across publishers to come up with standards and sort of industry-wide ways of thinking about this, right? Because tracking it one way with one publisher and a different way with a different publisher isn't going to work, right? It needs to be something where we can be doing it at scale, and I'll leave it there.
You know, I have, my library, not I, but my library has 3. And I have to say, we have BMJ case reports, and all I said was, I just want to break even. And I was really excited. The first year, we broke even. And we're on our 3rd year, and I'm really excited just to break even. And it's worked really positively. But we're a medical school, and we write case reports. We've moved on to 2 other publishers. I do them in 2-year blocks. I don't expect the first year to break even because we gotta introduce it into to our authors, and there's not very many of us. Our uptake has been our early career researchers, and they get so excited when I tell them that this has been made available to them. And so when we threw out this question, I said, I would love to see someone who assesses it. So my only advice to you all is break even, do it in 2-year blocks. Don't be frustrated after the first year. Just have the mindset to try to break even and focus, target your early career researchers because they really definitely are so grateful when they find out about it.
And most of ours have been 3 years, but with the same thought that we need enough time to really be able to assess the impact and to evaluate, have we actually seen an increase in the open access publishing, and then obviously at that point to renegotiate or to look at what might the change in the pricing be, because we've gone into these knowing what our 3-year commitment on pricing would be, and now we know as we get toward the end of those agreements that we're going to have a concern about whether it increases in price so much that we can no longer afford to sustain it for our authors. And none of us really wants to take candy away from the baby. None of us wants to get them comfortable with the idea that they're getting open access without APCs and then to have to say, whoops, we can't continue to afford it. We cannot aggregate money from other parts of the campus to do this. So that's why we're focusing a lot on these smaller agreements where we can afford to absorb it within our materials budget.
This is our last question. Oh, I don't know, we have like 2 more minutes.
Just a couple minutes. So.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, this is sort of a closing question, just really we want to understand what people are doing and to track publication and to track the deposit of open access, right? I think we've already kind of discussed what we do at our institutions, but we'd love to hear from you.
I think work in progress is true for most of us on these things right now, because it is, the tools are still being developed and we're all kind of learning as we go. Certainly something that's very important to our universities, it goes to the reputation management that Michael talked about in the beginning, that they're very interested in the quality and quantity of output of our authors because it affects the perception and reputation of the university. And so there's a lot of efforts through the provost's office. They use academic analytics and do a lot of tracking that way. The library doesn't really have a role in that, but we are doing other things like Chorus and other things where we can pull reports for them and share information, because no one tool seems to be sufficiently comprehensive. All of them have their failings. Anything else? So if you can go to that last slide. So
Sure.
we'll try to find a way. We'll try to find a way afterwards to capture some of this information and see if the Charleston folks can help us share back with you some of the data that we gathered from you.
I think I can download it and put it back into Pathables.
Oh, okay.
Oh, wonderful.
That would be great.
I think I can do that.
We'll try. But please feel free to contact any of us if you want to follow up with us about our particular scenarios or just any questions that you might have. And thank you very much for coming personally and virtually. It's nice to see some real live faces.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for attending, and really good to see you all in person.
Thank you.